Hello everybody, my name is Richard McCabe. I'm the photo curator at the Ogden Museum. Thank you for coming this afternoon for this curated conversation with the great Eddie Lanieri. And we're just going to talk for about maybe 30 minutes about her practice, her background in photography, and then I'll turn it over to you guys to ask some questions if you like. And we have a bunch of samples of her work up on the table, so I'll probably be holding them up during our talk, but afterwards, if you want to come up and take a close look at these, you're welcome to. So I'm going to introduce Eddie, Edna, and she went to Arizona State University, got her, is it BFA, Arizona State?
BA, actually.
BA.
In archaeology.
Archaeology, okay, great. And then she got her MFA at Florida State University in fine arts, photography. That's my alma mater, by the way, and I was there about 10 years before you. We were just talking about it. She didn't study with any of the people I did. But Eddie is a Salzburg Global Seminar Fellow. Complex Magazine named her one of the 20 artists from New Orleans you should see. British Airways named her one of the 6 artists to see while visiting New Orleans. They have to go to Mandeville to see you. So. And her work is included and has been exhibited internationally and nationally, including shows here at the Ogden Museum and the Contemporary Art Center across the street, the Luce Foundation and the Center for Fine Art Photography, Goldsmith College, and the Kinsey Institute. Her work is held in both private and public collections, and she has been supported by funds from the Mellon Foundation and Louisiana State Division of Arts. And I should say that this programming is in conjunction with Revelations exhibition, Revelations 2 exhibition that's on view on the 3rd floor here. It's a permanent collection, recent acquisitions exhibition in which Eddie is included in. And her photograph, Giselle, is in the exhibition as well, so we'll talk about that. So Eddie, I want to talk about, why did you come, okay, so you moved to New Orleans from Long Island.
Mm-hmm.
You're from Long Island, and you came to New Orleans, and was it in 2008 when you came here?
No, I came in 2007.
Okay.
2007.
And Giselle is from a series called Dress as Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to ask, the first question is, I would think it would be Dress as a Girl, but it's Dress as Girl. You want to explain that title?
Yeah. So the title comes from Shakespeare apparently would put in his work, and this is where, I mean, this is quoting sort of drag culture from what drag queens have told me, is that Shakespeare would put in his liner, because actresses were men who performed the female parts. He would put D-R-A-G in there, so dress as girl, like to indicate that the actor would be dressing up in a female costume for a female part.
Wow, that's really interesting. And what made you want to focus on drag queens as your first project in New Orleans? What was it about that? And you had a great quote where you talk about you were interested in documenting the third space, so maybe to that as well.
So when I moved to New Orleans, I didn't know anybody, but I had an acquaintance, and we became very good friends. And he was getting into drag, and so he would take me along. It's actually in the front. It's very front one. His name is the Contessa Cialis. Was his drag name. And he would take me along. He would just say, "Come on, we're gonna like hang out, and why don't you come hang out with us, and you can bring your camera," because he'd gone to Nichols. He'd studied art at Nichols. But what I think for a very personal, what I was experiencing or what I was seeing when I was photographing the drag queens, there was like a very personal experience that I was having. That it's been a couple of years now that I really realized like how anchored into the work that it was. Growing up in a very large Italian family, and a very masculine Italian family, because the men in my family outnumber us 3 to 1. There's 3 men to every woman, so there's a very heavy patriarchal family that I grew up in, or culture that I grew up in. As a woman, you get told, well, you're just not a man, and like your identity only becomes your identity until you get married and have children. Like that was sort of, you know, and then and Italian culture is kind of very notorious for being very like the labor is very gendered. Like women do this, men do that. And very early on, I didn't want to have children. I knew I didn't want to have children. I grew up like the oldest of all the cousins, and I was like the de facto babysitter. So I was like, this is not for me. And then right before I moved down here, and I don't know if I've actually like talked about this so much publicly, I was diagnosed with a stage 1 cancer, that the operation was going to make it very high risk, very difficult for me then to have children. And so I didn't, you know, at the time it was my choice, and then all of a sudden it wasn't going to be my choice anymore, or it was going to be a very difficult choice, and that was a different space to exist in, and that was a high questioning for me. Like, I didn't want to have kids, but I was always told that my identity only became activated when I became a mother or became, you know, a wife, and that started to make me think even further out, like how we describe woman, right, or women identifying as somebody who, you know, has a cycle that goes 21 to 28 days, and that's like, and then sort of breeding access and sexual access and all of that stuff, and like, how do we then make space for all of these other bodies and these other identities that could be insert if we only are sticking to this one sort of explanation of what a gender is supposed to be or supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And so while I was photographing these drag queens, you know, I was enjoying them. They were so warm and they were so welcoming. But there was also the idea, like, satirically dressing up as women and being on stage, and they get to go home and take the work. They get to take that off. And I didn't, you know, I don't get to take my gender off, and not to, you know, I think, you know, we're also talking about, you know, queer culture too, so, you know, there's also spaces within queer culture that I don't want to negate too, you know, gay men, but yeah, that's what, you know, like I didn't realize that that's what was going on until years later. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I loved the theatrics of it. But I also loved being, you know, they were in their home.
Yeah, that was my next question, because I didn't know if your website was indicative of the whole series, because every photo I saw, they're in their home. Mm-hmm. And they're not performing, or they're not public space. So maybe talk about why you chose to photograph them at that, instead of, you know, like at the Golden Lantern.
I mean, I took some photos. I don't know, they just didn't strike my interest. But also, again, thinking about how we gender spaces, again, the labor that's associated with spaces, and often it's the home and the internal that's gendered as female, that's gendered as woman. And I like dichotomies, I like paradoxes, I like sort of like these in between where they're rubbing up against one another. So you're taking a man, but you're making him vulnerable, and he's in an internal space, and he gets to perform it, and then he gets to take it off, and sort of that like ebb and flow between and all of that. So thinking about a man being vulnerable in a home, you know, and also the transformation, you know, I think so many cultures think when you're in these in-between spaces, it's a very magical sort of heightened space too.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you know, let's see, Dresses Girl, 2008, 2010 is when you were photographing for that. And then the next series we'll talk about, which I love this one as well. I mean, I think you got a lot of play on this one as far as press. Was the Southern Belle series, which was photographs of female boxers.
Yeah.
And you know, I should say, because I'm a big photo camera nerd, these are all made with film, I think, film cameras, and shot with a medium format Hasselblad, so you're working in black and white here. And then you move into color with a lot of these with the with the women boxers, and as Southern Bells is a play on the Southern Belle and the bell and
Yeah, it was very, very tongue in cheek.
That's
very
great.
cheeky.
So once again, I'll just read maybe the first line of your narrative on the series, and then maybe you can expound from that. You say, the boxing gym is a complex site to discuss class, gender, race, and social relations. So I'll let you take it from there. But I think that's just such great, going from Dresses Girl to Southern Belle is just a great transition.
It was the other side of it. For me, it was the other side of the coin. Like, right, like thinking about men, internal, vulnerable. What would be a woman who's taking up space, or sitting in a powerful way that we often associate with men, or being more masculine, if you will. I grew up, my grandfather, actually, so one of the reasons also, I like to photograph communities that I have some sort of a connection with. I'm not very comfortable because of who I am. I love having a camera because it's such a great filter for me, because I can be very introverted and like vulnerability. And so for me, having a camera, and that also includes like the communities that I want to collaborate and photograph with. So I boxed. I got my amateur card. I went into the Golden Gloves. I got hit really hard, and I went, I need my eyes. This was a lot of fun, but my grandfather was a boxer, or I should say, when he was in World War II, he would box, and it was a way for me to sort of also connect with my grandfather, and then just thinking again, referencing back like to my family and like this Italian. This Italian culture that I grew up in, just sort of the masculinity of it. Like even like watching the women, even watching them warm up, they're going around the heavy bag, and they're boxing on the heavy bag. And I took photos of it, in the collectors. I've got so many. You have to, the heavy bag has to swing. And you've got to move around the heavy bag because it teaches you how to throw your punches and like how to deal with like something very heavy coming at you and how to guard yourself. And the women, as powerful as they were, you would see men on the other side of them just sort of really owning, like taking up on this. So the women had like this smaller circle that they had to maneuver around. And then, and these were the women that were like, actually they were fighting. Not that these men weren't, but these were like, they were training. She was a professional boxer, and that is just even the small sort of micro, like again thinking about a gender, like the boxing gym is such a, it's such a virile, such a masculine, and they were, they're tough. Those women are tough, and it's all Southern, right? So it's all women in Texas and Louisiana too, and I think that was the other thing to think about. In Italian culture, it's very gendered, and women are supposed to do this and blah blah blah. And then I think sometimes too here in the South, I saw sort of an echo of it here in the South as well.
I liked when you said it's collaboration with, because a lot of in the documentary tradition, people kind of parachute into a place, take a bunch of pictures, and get out.
Yeah.
Where these are long-term projects, something you were interested in, you actually boxed. So that was the comfort level. You to be able to get these pictures, I think is really interesting, and it comes through also in Dresses Girl, very much so.
Yeah, I've my process is very. I'm not quick. In my work starts very micro. It becomes like very internal, and sometimes it's very methodical, and I've got to like process it, and I've got to be comfortable, and I start taking images, and it takes a while for bodies of work to come out of me. I'm not very quick. I'd like to be quicker. I'm just not.
Right. Well, let's see. And if I'm moving too fast, we can y'all can talk about these a little bit later. But do you want to go to Terra Incognita next?
Yeah.
And these are beautiful little Polaroids. And of course, you can't see them, but you're welcome to come up and look at them.
Yeah.
So I love Polaroids. I don't know if you guys know what I've done here at curating. We did a Polaroid show here about 5 years ago. We brought the 20 by 24 camera. There's only 5 in existence. We had it set it up here, and did an exhibition on Polaroids. I've been known to shoot with Polaroids, so these are
right up your alley.
yeah, these are near and dear to my heart, and I love these are landscape images of the Louisiana swampland. So your work is very different. You know, this is a kind of a transition, I think, from the people for one, and the community. So now you're photographing the landscape, and you talk about the series on bayous are the edges of the communal suburban spaces in southeast Louisiana. So do you want to talk about the series and maybe why you wanted to do it in Polaroids? What made you bring that into your practice and process?
Yeah, there was several things. So first, with like Dresses Girl and with Drag Queen, when I was making them, this is like pre-social media. This is like there's the internet and there's an onslaught of like photography, but it's so different now with social media. And so the idea of always being like, you're gonna interact with a photograph, you're gonna see it in a museum, you're gonna see it in a gallery, you're gonna see it in a book. There's like very specific spaces that you were going to see. And so I always thought of like the print. The print is so important, like it was always so important to me. The quality, like thinking about the paper and the chemistry and like the film that I'm using, thinking about the print as an actual landscape itself was always so important to me. There was a little bit too, when I got done with both those projects, I'd show the work and I'd be like, oh yeah, drag queens, everybody's doing drag queens. Or like there wasn't this interest in them. And so I myself got a little like, what am I doing? Do I want to keep doing this? And then like social media started to like take off and like this sort of really meta experience of photographs that are getting made just so that they can be reproduced, replicated, and just sent around again and again and again and again and again. And I wanted to really think about like, well, how else can I think about like making something that's one of a kind, that's very handmade. The other thing I was thinking about too is, portrait photography is it's very selfish. I'm asking these people, even though I'm collaborating with it, there's a part of it that's like, hey, you're gonna live in stasis. You're gonna be photographed in this moment as soon as the shutter hits, and you're gonna be this avatar for this thing that I'm having a conversation with. You're gonna be this vessel. But you're gonna be my vessel. Like I was just sort of thinking about that a little bit with like portrait work and like how we some of my students, like sometimes we'll have the students read some of the reactions to Let Us Now Praise, or, and like the family about, after these photographs were taken. And I think about that sometimes when I'm photographing people. So all of that was kind of going on, and I had just purchased a house, my first house, and I had lived in cities my whole life, and so I wasn't used to the encroachment of the Louisiana southern landscape. It just takes over, especially like I don't even know my backyard right now because it's just so overgrown, and how violent it could get too. And in tandem with that was the political landscape of the country as well. A lot of my neighbors have different political views than I do, and just sort of listening to that and just listening to how here in the South, and like also, here in New Orleans, we were having a conversation about the taking down of the Confederate statues and how that was bringing up conversations and how, like just the idea of like we put so much into a land, we put so much memory into a land, into an area or to a space. You can't just say like the South isn't a monolithic space. It's not a monolithic identity, but there is something about it that's like very memory evoking. I don't know. Does that make sense? So there was a bit of frustration. I was like, I wasn't sure where to go, and I was like, I'm just gonna take my Polaroid out and like see what it does, and I was just gonna play. And then and the other thing too is like, and then thinking about all of that stuff too. Instead of using an actual portrait, or actual like a photograph. I really wanted to like the viewer. Like I really wanted this to be like if I gave you a snippet of an image and like I titled them all based off of something that was going on just on the outside of like when I was photographing. So like this image, there was a woman walking with a stick and then there was like a huge snake in my path. And so like if I give you like this little information and if I give you just this little bit of a title, what do you think of? Why are you thinking of that? And what is the biases that you're bringing to that space? And so that's what I mean. So that's what I mean, like the politics of it all, because we do bring a bias whenever we look at something or we ever interact, and we sort of fill in the gaps whenever we have just almost a little bit of information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I just photographer that's coming up in October. Exhibition we're having, Ramel Ross. If you guys know his work, it's unbelievable. He did the film Hell County this morning this evening. Nominated for an Academy Award, didn't win, should have won. And then he's still photographing, and he was talking about can the landscape be political? You know, he's like, I want to make a picture of that. How can I make it political? Or, you know, and so he told me, oh, I just made this picture. It's great. I wrote political in the Alabama clay, and I took a picture of it. So that was his political landscape. So,
but I think, yeah, I mean, Louise, again, like you think of the South. I mean, you can't think of the South and not think of politics in some level.
And then you also talk about the series moving away from direct representation. I guess. I mean, I'm so fascinated with the object for one. Don't let me get off subject here, but the object of Polaroids, I think, is so important because everything's gone digital. Everybody's using this, you know. So when you take a Polaroid, it's so great to hold it in your hand, and I mean, it's amazing. It just brings you back to that, you know, the birth of photography and the object for one. But then you're manipulating the landscape a little bit with what you're doing. You're floating. These are, I guess, what we call Polaroid transfers. So you're actually taking the original image, you're transferring it onto another piece of paper, and in the process of that, they become manipulated a little bit. So you're tweaking the landscape a little bit. So,
which is what we do, right? Like even just like me owning a house and paying taxes is me manipulating the landscape. You know, I trim my hedges. I'm manipulating the landscape. You know, my neighbor puts a "Don't tread on me" flag. You know, it's all. But I think from like thinking about, it's in the mundane. It is in like this every day that these politics are happening. It's not always these big. I mean, currently it has been, but you know, it's always. And so like the direct, I guess too, like going back to the idea of direct representation is like, it's all like in social media and like. I'm finding, and there's beautiful works. I never want to say, in a very judgmental way, that a lot of document and how we faithfully believe, like, oh, I saw it on Instagram, I saw it on, you know, whatever, like, oh, it's just this thing, and we don't kind of sometimes critically think about that. And it's been a beautiful way to lend for documentary photography. I think it's been great. But there was just something I wanted to sort of start walking away from direct representation.
Right.
Is that clear? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. Also the one-off, one of a kind.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a one of a kind. It cannot be reproduced. I guess you could scan it and print multiples of it.
Yeah, but I don't even want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's getting away from it's because you're working with photography, but it seems like a lot of things you do are working against the inherent, you know, technology and its ability to reproduce mass and large prints and all that. So you're really tweaking with the founding concepts of the whole technology and the medium. So this is another series that's talking about one of a kind and moving away from direct representation. This is the series you're currently working on. It's called Communion of Saints. And it's also deals with your family. So I'm going to let you take it from there.
So I think I was starting to work on, and it was a project that I've always wanted to do, was to talk about the Italian influence in Louisiana. and the Italian immigration influence in the United States, and thinking about past as prologue, with what Italian immigrants went through 100 years ago, the Immigration Act of 1924, and sort of the implications of eugenics, like in our country, and this also with Jewish immigrants and also with Chinese immigrants. They were also doing, but very, I'm Italian, so I'm going to talk about Italian immigrants. The way our country treated Italian immigrants is now being very reflected in contemporary immigration. And so I was documenting, I went in Independence, Louisiana, there's a Sicilian American festival. So I went there and I was photographing. They do like a spaghetti cook-off, and I was taking very typical documentary photographs. And it just wasn't landing, for me the way that I wanted it to. And so when we went into quarantine, to keep my head busy, or to keep my hands busy, both, I got back into embroidery, which is actually something. So when I was a kid, we had family that lived in the Appalachian corner of North Carolina, and there was nothing to do except going canoeing and blueberry picking, and they taught me how to embroider. And so it was very I could sit in front of the TV and embroider. I really like this.
That's great.
But I live here. My whole family lives back, in New York. I'm here. It's just me and my dog. So I've just been thinking about there's all these things. But so my last name actually translates. Lanieri actually translates to somebody who works with wool, or textiles. And my family, when they immigrated to the United States, found jobs in textile factories. And my great-grandfather owned he made shoes. He was a shoe cobbler. So I'm just trying to make all of these stories. So there's contemporary photos of my cousin in there with that's me with my grandparents on my christening. And I'm very much referencing in Sicily, where my family's from, they're from Bagheria, and then they're from this little town called Valgonera Carotepe, which is in the center of Sicily. They have these Sicilian carts. They're very these beautiful decorated Sicilian carts, and they have allegories on them, and they tell stories. And most of the time the portraits they're round, and they've got these beautiful filigrees on them. The churches, where my family's from, also just have all these beautiful gold mosaics. And also just referencing, sometimes this, Italians can be a little garish. Sometimes it can be a little opulent with. So this has been work that I've been working on this past year. So it's very brand new. It's super brand new, but again, it was just this idea of making a one of a kind that can't be replicated.
Right. And this is gold leaf.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really nice.
It's linen, gold leaf, and embroidery.
That's nice. It's really cool, and I love the fact that it's one of a kind, handmade, and the sewing and kind of blending the crafts together. But also, I know from my Russian icon study that the gold means eternity, correct?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe from the icons, definitely. But that was definitely there's so much Italian, so much Italian, just looking even at Italian Renaissance art, but just
right, exactly.
Medieval art. I lived in Italy for several years, so just always being surrounded by that
right.
imagery too is just sort of ingrained in my person.
Right. Well, I think it's just interesting how your work is very different. It goes through many stages, but it's kind of dealing with the same concepts of, community and family and memory and place, and yet you handle each series is so different from straight traditional photography to kind of this post-modern take on photography and taking it to another medium. I don't know if I mentioned it, but Annie does teach photography at Xavier University. She teaches traditional wet darkroom and digital photography, and that's how we met. I taught there for a while. And I think we've gone about 30 minutes, so I think at this point I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions.
Okay, so I see you like to work with alternative processes when you're coming up with your final product. But then also what you showed us first was very far from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious as to whether or not you ever feel like you're towing the line between photojournalism and fine art photography when you're simply working on prints.
I would definitely not say. I would say that I'm more within the fine art, especially with this work. You know, I was right out of graduate school with the Dresses Girl and the boxing stuff, and it, you know, sort of conditioned into like, this is what photography should look like. This is what photography should be. And I was actually working for, technically I was working for Arnold Newman, but he had just passed, and I was working for the Howard Greenberg Gallery and the Ransom Center, in taking all of Arnold Newman's studio work down, his little studio, and like sort of archiving it. And just being surrounded by that sort of influenced a lot of the work. When I get into the dark room, I can get very sort of too myopic and like too, I want it to be so perfect that I frustrate myself.
You're talking about just a print.
Just a print, yeah, just the print. Where I really wanted to expand, I need to let go a little bit. I need to let go of control a little bit on certain things. So the Dresses Girl and the boxing series are probably over 10. You know, they're over 10 years old now at this point. I mean, this is from 2008. Yeah, like, so this is like fresh out of grad school. And the work that I was, and too, like the work that I was doing in grad school was very experimental too, but I don't know, sometimes you get, I don't know, I guess sometimes you can get influenced by like, oh, like, well, this is what everybody else is doing. Is this what's gonna help me get seen? You know, when you're first starting out?
Mm-hmm.
So, does that?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced that pretty much still. I've been out of grad school for now 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, grad school really kind of screws you up.
Yeah.
It really confuses you, I
Yeah.
think, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, that was my experience,
Mm-hmm.
at least. And I'll tell you, it was actually Polaroids that got me back to just do it. You know,
Yeah.
Sally Mann says, photograph what you love. I mean, that's the best advice someone can give you. It's just so simple. I wish they would have told me that in graduate school.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been confused, but it's just the being able to just do the simplest thing and get an image.
Yeah.
And that was really what freed my mind again.
And it did the same thing for me, because
Yeah.
there's a long period where I just wasn't making work, because I was just
Because you're questioning everything.
Well, I think a lot of students and people see education as you're being given direction by whoever's issuing the instruction about how to do things, but I don't think as students we ever give ourselves enough credit to take the instruction that we're given and do what we want with it. Instead, you think, okay, well, I have to do what this
Right, or
teacher
try
says.
to do what you think people like,
Right.
or, you know, which is worse.
Because you, I mean, really, you know, I'm a teacher now too, and I don't want to specifically tell a kid, okay, it's this way, go about your life that way. I want them to take that knowledge, and then when it's time to make a decision, they can either go with what I told them or not, but at least they have that option. And I don't think that we've ever really absorbed information as students that way. I think you depend way too much on what the person's saying. You don't give yourself enough credit.
Yeah. I will also say, like, as a recovering people pleaser,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes I was making work because I was like, okay, they're gonna, you know, and just learning to be like, no, I really just want to make something that's not in my own. But it takes a long time to get there. It can be very hard to get there.
Well,
Being
to
okay
stay
with
there
that.
is even harder.
Yeah.
I'd like to revisit your Polaroids again.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what inspired you to use a Polaroid for landscape? You're giving up the use of paper, the use of chemicals. You can't manipulate them. And then, in addition to that, they're very ephemeral. They're not going to last forever. And you just have that one.
So I was told to repeat the questions because we're being recorded. So the question was why. The question was why you use Polaroids, and they're very ephemeral. Is that correct?
Well, for landscape.
For landscape, why do you use Polaroids for
And
landscape?
you're also giving up your ability to choose your paper because there it is, or chemicals.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there they are. It's fixed. So, and there's only one of them. It's a one-shot thing.
Yeah. So why use Polaroids, the one of a kind, and they're very ephemeral, and to photograph the landscape.
And to lose control over the paper and the chemical process.
Well, I part of it was losing control. Like I wanted to lose control. I really did. I wanted to like not be so fixated. Like, oh, this camera and this film and like I wanted to. I like a little bit of chaos. I like that sort of murky middle. So I wanted something that could lean into that chaos. And I gotta tell you, like, I've taken them, and as I was like manipulating them, one went down the drain. I kind of went, oh well, what am I gonna do? You know, like, oh well, what am I gonna do with that? That is what it is. And sort of moving into that. I don't know. Nothing lasts forever either. I don't. You know, when it's time for it to no longer be, it's not going to be, and you know that's also letting go of control of some of that too. Just a lot of it was. There was a lot going on in my life when I was starting. It was also a very chaotic time in my life, and I remember like walking I was taking my dogs out for a lot of walks, and just listening to the conversations that people were having, and I was like, let me take out the Polaroid camera and see what this does. So there was lack of control that I wanted, and like a little bit of play that I needed, and this project. Again, I have my process is I'm not quick. I'm a lot slower, and so the thought probably started in 2017, but I don't think I started making until about 2018. Like really thinking about what the project is about. So, is that an answer? Yeah.
Let me follow on with that just a little bit. Is it a 6x6 Polaroid?
So 6x6 Polaroid is the question.
Yeah, it's just the Polaroid, the 600, the little Insta Polaroid.
I think it's Impossible Project film is what she's using, and that's called the integrated. There's two types. There's integrated, that's the type that shoots out of your camera and then you watch it develop in front of you. Or now you put it in a black box and it develops. Or there's the peel apart stuff, which was another kind of film she used. But,
yeah. I do have. So I did. So I do have. Just because we're recording. I just want to do it just because we're recording.
That wasn't you making that noise.
Well, I have some more from this. So this actually started out as a Polaroid project. I had I have a Polaroid back for my Hasselblad, and I just enjoyed the quick. So I think, and my first camera, my first sort of entry into photography was like in 8th grade. Somebody had given me a Polaroid camera, and we went to Washington D.C. So I think Polaroids have always it's always sort of been weaved into my interest as well. But yeah, just I just Impossible picked up making Polaroids again, or they didn't call it emulsion, instant film. And they were making round frames, and I thought that was really interesting. So I used that, and then eventually Polaroids started making Polaroids again.
I haven't used Polaroids for 100 years, so you know about where mine went.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of new technology associated with Polaroids. You used the word manipulate when you were looking at that photograph. What did you mean by that?
The question was the word manipulate. on the Polaroids, what do you mean by manipulation?
Oh, well, so cutting, first of all, they're cut. Like I actually cut them out.
These are lifts.
Yeah, these are lift. Yeah, they're a lift. So I take them out. So I take the picture of the Polaroid. Sorry, I apologize for not explaining that. I take the Polaroid out. So I take the photograph, and then you can actually take the Polaroid out of the plastic casing, which actually does have chemicals in it. And I actually did like experiment with, like when I was doing this, I put them on glass, I put them on different paper. So I just landed on the paper that I'm using because it was it's paper that's used for platinum and palladium printing, so it could take being in water for a long, yeah, it could take being in water for a while. So it would you take the, so, you know, typically it's the little square, but I made a little template and I made a frame, and so I would cut them, and then you could peel apart the plastic topping and you put it in water, and you then let it float, and it's like a very viscousy, like wet tissue-y substance that you can then place on another substrate.
It's essentially removing the emulsion.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, it's an emulsion lift.
Okay.
And I use a brush to get the edges. I try to get some of the edges there, but sometimes I like to play a little bit. I guess when you come up and see, like if people come up and see, you'll see that I kind of it's a play. You just kind of go, great. This is what it is. This is what it does. This is, not overthinking it too much. Like, okay, that's how it landed. I'll see what that does.
So it's not what you see is what you get image. It's one that you actually have an opportunity to adjust.
Yeah.
It's manipulated Polaroid. It's not the original. So, but that's interesting. You said it's not precious, but they are precious because they're one of a kind. So it's also playing with that idea of, when one goes down the drain, you're not too.
And it did. I mean, they did so many of them. I was like, oh, well, there that one goes. What am I going to do with that? I'm not using it. Or like I would take them apart and I would leave them in the water too long and they would just rip. So they're very delicate, and like sometimes when you take them apart, I learned that if I could do it really quick, and that's also probably why, because I was just photographing like around my home. Because it was easy, I could like run out and like go to like Fountain Blue State Park or something like that and like take some photos and be home in time that the chemical on the back hadn't sat so long, because there's like a white film on the back of when the chemistry sits, and it's very difficult. You have to be very meticulous to get it off. So if it's a little bit of a fresher Polaroid, it's easier to clean and like lift off.
Well, we want Eddie to teach at the Polaroid lift class workshop, so you guys are interested in it. Hopefully we can offer that here soon.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And I'll take the class too, because I've never done it.
It's a very interesting process. It sounds like, I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's very, it's a very, like, you have to give up control, but you can also control it a little bit. And it was very meditative for me. Like, you're just sitting there and you're rocking the water back and forth, and like, just sort of pushing the Polaroid and sort of moving it around. It's like very quiet. It's very, I don't want to sound cliche, but I'll sound cliche. Like, it's very sort of meditative and zen and sort of, those very, in a time where I was having a lot of chaos in my life, this was both chaotic and soothing. So I love dichotomy. I love paradox. I love like that. So I like things that are both quiet and chaotic, controlled and chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the questions.
Do you have a project you're working on now?
Yeah, so so this is always ongoing. I wait till the winter time to photograph, because I just love the quality of the way that there's just something, to see the cypress trees and to see the swamp bare feels a little bit different. So this is always ongoing. I just go out and do it, but this is the current project that I'm really working on right now. with these.
Well, thanks everybody for coming out, and you're welcome to come up and take a closer look at this work. And we're going to be hanging out for a little bit longer. And thank you, Eddie, so
Yeah,
much.
thank
and this
you.
was
Thank you so
good,
much for coming. Thank you for coming
appreciate
out.
it.